Sur le terrain, des coups de feu ont été tirés sur un immeuble résidentiel hier soir dans l'arrondissement de Mercier-Hochelaga-Maisonneuve à Montréal. Anne-Sophie, le SPVM enquête.
Pierre Magnan, c'est tout près de l'avenue Louis-Dupire, ici dans Mercier-Hochelaga-Maisonneuve. On voit encore les impacts de balles ce matin, donc je vous montre les images en direct. Ça s'est passé un peu après 22 heures hier. Les policiers qui sont arrivés sur les lieux et qui ont localisé là, plusieurs impacts de balles, comme vous voyez, sur la façade d'un triplex. Il y avait aussi plusieurs douilles au sol. La bonne nouvelle, c'est que personne n'a été blessé, nous a indiqué un porte-parole du SPVM. Il y a des témoins, par contre, qui ont été rencontrés par les policiers là, juste après les coups de feu. 2 suspects qui ont été vus, qui ont quitté rapidement les lieux à bord d'un véhicule, qui n'ont pas encore été localisés par les policiers. Donc, c'est pour ça qu'ils enquêtent toujours à tenter de savoir qui a tiré sur ce triplex. Aussi, pourquoi ce triplex? C'est la question qu'on se pose ce matin. Il ne semble pas y avoir eu d'autres événements criminels ici sur cette rue, sur cet immeuble dans les dernières années. Alors, on se demande pourquoi ces gens-là ont été visés. Mais comme je vous dis, au moins, la bonne nouvelle, c'est qu'il n'y a pas eu de blessés. Là, mais hier, il y avait vraiment le maître chien enquêteur qui était sur place pour tenter de faire la lumière sur cet événement.
Merci Anne-Sophie, à tantôt.
Merci, à plus tard.
Puis, une autre affaire qui a fait beaucoup de bruit aujourd'hui, c'est un homme que les policiers connaissent bien, qui a été la cible de coups de feu à Val-Alain.
Oui, exactement. Appel qui est entré là, à la Sûreté du Québec vers 14h15. Des suspects qui auraient fait éruption donc, dans une résidence du 4e rang à Val-Alain, qui aurait fait feu donc, sur cet homme. Il a subi des blessures, mais sa vie n'est pas en danger. Et à la suite de cet événement, il y a eu toute une opération policière. Vers 15h15, la Sûreté du Québec qui a procédé à l'arrestation donc, du et des suspects. 3 personnes qui ont été arrêtées sur l'autoroute Félix-Leclerc, sur l'autoroute 40, près d'Henri Bourassa. L'autoroute qui a même dû être fermée là, pendant une certaine période pour procéder à ces arrestations. Maintenant, ces personnes sont rencontrées par les enquêteurs de la Sûreté du Québec. Évidemment, on fera un suivi là, à savoir s'il y a des arrestations dans ce dossier. Mais je vous le rappelle, cette personne qui a été atteinte par des projectiles, donc sa vie n'est pas en danger.
Merci, Rosalie.
So note this, all the accused are from Montreal. They are Jean-François Hutchinson, 44 years old, Billy Diverzi, 40 years old, and Peggy Roldan Paul, 32 years old. So our friends here drove 2 hours. They're not from the area. They got no business being over there, unless this was business. Is this just a personal beef, or is this another drip from the underworld? I'm leaning on the latter. It was a busy Wednesday as cops arrested 6 people in Saguenay. If you don't know, that's the territory of Alboivin. And the people arrested, you guessed it right, his men. These arrests happened as part of a year-long investigation. Nicolas Gagnon and Jimmy Harvey, both 33, appeared in court on the same day. A man and 2 women between 30 to 70 years of age were also arrested. Now, I did say 6 people, yet I just named 5 only because the last guy deserves his own place. On Wednesday, the SWAT team penetrated the borough of Jonquière in order to arrest the brother-in-law of Alboivin. Marc Cossette, 46 years of age, was a wanted man on the run since this summer, as is Alboivin, the number 1 or 2 most wanted in Canada. Therefore, that tells you one thing. They are, at least metaphorically, one step closer to Alboivin. So before he skipped court last time and he went on the run, law enforcement say that he was active in the drug trade inside of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean and along the north coast. Seems like that was his man right there. So the question here becomes, are they getting closer to Alboivin, or is this still a red herring? They seem to be catching everybody around him or Pictomel, but never them. You gotta give it to the guys.
Près d'une dizaine d'individus liés au groupe criminalisé qui ont été arrêtés à Québec, à Rivière-du-Loup, ce matin, lors d'une opération d'envergure. Tout ça dans le cadre de la guerre des stupéfiants, pour en parler. Bon, tout ça semble en lien avec le BFM, le Blood Family Mafia, donc la police qui continue de, je sais pas quoi, serrer l'étreinte, trouver des façons de s'en prendre à ce groupe de criminels organisés, pas trop organisés.
Puis très souvent, ce qu'on vit dans le cas du crime organisé, c'est que les gens se commettent des crimes entre eux et ils se revengent sans arrêt un contre l'autre. Ça ne veut pas dire que ça n'amène pas des erreurs à personne, on le sait très bien.
Speaking about mistaken identity or error on the person, we've shown you multiple examples, and we will keep doing so because it will continue to happen. The contract murder game seems to regularly generate errors. And today, one such error will be exposed on a previous story that we covered, which we had speculated about. So keep that in mind for later, friend.
Roger, il n'y a pas un risque quand tu arrêtes ça d'une partie de l'organisation, quand tu fais une perquisition, quand tu mets des gens derrière les barreaux, que l'autre organisation à côté en profite. Les Hells vont dire, bon, ils sont affaiblis, c'est le temps d'aller attaquer, c'est le temps de reprendre du terrain. Quand on s'attaque aux Hells, la Blood Family fait, OK, c'est le temps d'aller prendre... C'est toujours ça qui est difficile avec la police, c'est que tu t'affaiblis, tu crées peut-être même plus de chaos pour les prochaines semaines. Là.
Back in December, I covered the death of Jennifer Morin. She was 45 years old, and I think her son was a stupefier dealer, or at least within the pipeline. I remember she was targeted, or at least her name was mentioned as part of an investigation into a stupefier network back in 2021. Anyhow, she was acquitted, but her son had gotten a sentence in an alleged BFM pipeline. Now, it was just weird that 3 years after the fact, she gets murdered. Now, you remember we speculated on two likely options for this one. Either it's a retaliation, something to do with her son, maybe his own friends. The only other option was their enemies. And today we receive a suggestion on which option we may have to lean on. Listen to Félix Séguin.
Bonsoir, Julie.
Est-ce qu'on peut dire que la police de Québec a vraiment porté un coup dur aux indépendants liés à Dave Turmel?
Oui, parce que les gens qui ont été visés ce matin, pour certains, ils étaient en contact direct avec ce fameux Dave Turmel, la guerre des indépendants contre les Hells Angels de la région de Québec, il faut bien le dire. Alors, ce matin, l'individu le plus connu qui a été visé, c'est sûrement Jeffrey Morin dans une résidence de Saint-Augustin de Desmaures. Le groupe tactique d'intervention l'a surpris ce matin, lui et sa conjointe. On l'a arrêté.
Now, pay attention.
Il faut savoir que depuis déjà quelques semaines, Jeffrey Morin était sur ses gardes parce que sa mère, en décembre dernier, dans un appartement de Charlebourg, a été assassinée. Selon des informations qui nous parviennent de très bonnes sources, il s'agissait d'une erreur sur la personne. C'était plutôt son fils qui était visé et probablement par des gens liés aux Hells Angels. Alors, il vivait beaucoup d'inquiétudes par rapport à cela. Alors, il était visé de toutes parts. De bonnes sources, on nous dit même que c'est peut-être une délivrance que ce soit le groupe tactique d'intervention qui soit intervenu chez lui, plutôt que ses ennemis, surtout dans ce quartier. Si ses ennemis le trouvaient dans ce quartier et décidaient d'user des techniques dont ils usent habituellement, il y aurait pu avoir cette proverbiale balle perdue qui aurait pu causer beaucoup de soucis à des innocents.
Last Friday, security footage obtained by Radio-Canada showed a person dressed in black breaking into the building not long before it began burning. 23 people got out. 3-year-old Léonard Géraudy and her 7-year-old daughter Vérane Renaud-Géraudy died in the five-alarm blaze. Officers informed their family back in France that the arrests had been made and said they were happy to hear the news amid their sorrow. Police are still trying to find the mastermind behind the attack.
We're not going to reveal why we know it, but we know there's somebody called shot, so we want to get at this person for sure.
Police say building owner Émile Benamor has been collaborating with them. He also owns the Old Montreal building that went up in flames in March of 2023. 7 lives were lost in that fire. 3 men were arrested for shooting at another building owned by Benamor on Tuesday. Police say their goal is to bring justice for those affected and their families. Quebec's chief coroner announced this week there will be a public coroner's inquest into last week's fire, the same coroner investigating the 2023 fire.
Oh, do I wish this was true, but it doesn't seem the case anymore. Not in Canada. Now back to the regular programming.
On a saisi beaucoup d'armes à feu, Félix. Ça démontre vraiment tout le caractère violent de ces groupes criminels.
So this Wednesday was one of the biggest hit against the BFM. This one definitely is going to hurt. So the raids were in 2 regions, in Quebec and Rivière-du-Loup. 6 search warrants in these 2 locations. So the key figures in this BFM bust is, as mentioned earlier, Jeffrey Morin, 26. We have a Maxime Légacé, 30 years old. Davion Costner, Now, what is really interesting is the period of the actual infractions tied to these tools are dated between the 13th to the 17th of January this year, 2025. Whereas the charges for stupefier trafficking are for the end of November to January. So one thing's for sure, they did not catch these guys in the act of committing murder with these tools, or else they would have arrested them already. But they did confirm somehow that they did have these weapons, yet they did not bust them. So if they knew that they had these dangerous weapons on the 17th, how come they had to wait until the 29th? It's 12 days with these weapons for these dangerous criminals who are at war with the Hells Angels. Anyways, that's a very interesting contradiction that'll be fun to uncover later in an aha moment. Now, the previous video, we said that the cops took an L. They practically got nothing for all that effort. But what about this one? I have 24 long weapons seized, 13 sawed-off tools, 10 high-capacity chargers, dozens of boxes of munitions, 1 taser, 30,000 units of M&Ms, 500 grams of cane, 11 cell phones, and approximately $1,500 in Canadian cash. Now, if it was only for the stupefiers, I'd say they were taking an L. But this time, the cops definitely grabbed something significant because of the arms. 24 long assault rifles. It does sound like the cops hit their war stash. I don't know about you, but that does sound like the main one. I highly doubt that they have a place stacked with 100 of them. This might have been it, boys. Now, speaking of an AR-15 or long assault tools, 2 men were hired for a job on September 4th of 2023. As they were going from the West Anglosphere to the East Francosphere, neither to kill a French or an English man. Not that day, they had Italia in their mind. Mathieu Scott-Dumont and Benjamin Paquette were dispatching, and it was not in Little Italy, as you may have guessed. As investigators would show, he was roaming a car dealership in order to gather intel for the men that he was about to dispatch. The men who were doing the dispatching were themselves assigned this task, as there was higher interests at play. On September 4th, 2023, the dispatch rolled upon an East End dealership. If you've been following our channel, if I say the East End and I mention a dealership, that should ring bells. On that evening at 10:40, it did ring 10 times. It was clearly a message to whomever it may concern, and that message was confirmed in court to come from the Hells Angels. It seems the Hells Angels were at war, and not only against the BFM. And on the month before, on August 2nd, who else could it be? The dealership was Molotoved 2 times in 2016 and 17. We found out during the year that there is a war for the book. The Italians wrote the book. Why should they give it up? Why not focus on stupefiers? Well, it does seem that gangs that were once muscle in their pipelines have grown bigger and stronger and more resourceful. They've built their networks. They can get everything themselves. Hence, not only the Hells Angels have to contend with law enforcement, they are now at direct competition with the street gangs. So these days, you gotta ask yourself if the juice is worth the squeeze. And it looks like for Martin Robert, the Fat Balso's offer was the future of the Hells Angels in Montreal. He is feeling the inevitable weight of age. And with age comes more wisdom and more calculated decisions. And one of their highest priorities must have been to diversify away from stupefiers. And no inventory to worry about smuggling in, and the multiple layers of risks that adds, and still with high profit margins. Ah, the gambling book that got the underboss kidnapped and tortured for. Nothing worthwhile comes without blood and sacrifice. But at least this time, the sacrifice was an outsider. But coming back to our man, Marco Pizzi, on the last attacks, they were not trying to kill the guy. And I wonder, why the change of heart? Because it seems that prior to this, someone actually wanted him gone. The Bloods of Montreal have a great track record. This would not be the first time they backed off at the last second because of children playing.
Un guet-apens entendu pour le tuer hier. Félix Séguin va nous montrer que ça s'est passé tout près d'un parc fréquenté par un camp de jour.
Nous sommes au coin des rues Prince-Albert et Grande-Allée dans Montréal-Est, près des raffineries de pétrole. Qu'est-ce qui est arrivé ici? Tentative de meurtre sur Marco Pizzi. C'est arrivé, voici. Un véhicule suivait celui de Marco Pizzi, avec l'intention très ferme de percuter le véhicule de Pizzi afin que celui-ci sorte du sien. C'est exactement ce qui est arrivé jusque-là. Ça se passait comme les assaillants l'avaient prévu, en fait. Marco Pizzi, quand il est sorti de sa voiture, ce qu'il a vu, c'est deux hommes cagoulés. Semble-t-il, selon les premiers témoins, qu'ils avaient des fusils automatiques, des mitraillettes. Et là, Marco Pizzi, c'est là où ça se gâte, a décidé de se sauver pour se rendre ici, à l'abri des tirs, dans le parc, et où il y a un camp de pleine journée hier. Il y a un camp de jour, il y aurait pu avoir des conséquences. Les gens qui sont arrivés ici en premier, près de l'incident, pensaient que c'était en fait un accident, comme le raconte une témoin.
Un auto qui était là, deux autos, je pense qu'ils avaient foncé dedans, parce qu'il y avait le capot qui était surélevé, là.
On peut vous dire, par exemple, que le fait que ce soit arrivé tout près, d'où des dizaines d'enfants jouent chaque jour, ça fait réagir certains témoins de la scène.
Sûr que si les gars, ils auraient tiré des coups de feu, mais là, ils auraient laissé des enfants ou tuer du monde. Il y a tout le temps du monde dans le parc.
Il y a tout le temps du monde dans le parc. There's always people in the park. The children's park. But the shooters did not decide to pull the trigger that day. And thankfully that was intentional, friend. Brown Rock. Kevin Rochebrun was 26 at the time when he was arrested in August of 2016, exactly a week after the attempt on Marco Pizzi's life. They ambushed him using a vehicle, blocking his passage. But Marco fled the scene on his feet, either intentionally or unintentionally on the spur of the moment, decided to run through a children's park. Kevin Rochebrun, whom I'll be calling Brown Rock, and his colleague were holding machine guns, but they didn't fire with it. Mr. Brown Rock was sentenced to 5 years in the pen, and so he had plenty of time to think about the consequences for his actions. And he concluded that it was all worth it, and that he would do it again.
Murder of the youngest son of the late reputed Montreal Mafia boss, Vito Rizzuto. Last year, Leonardo Rizzuto's black Mercedes was sprayed with bullets while he was driving on Highway 440 in Laval. The 53-year-old suffered leg injuries but survived. CTV News has now confirmed that Kevin Rochebrun, 33, and Steve Emmanuel Barthélemy, 35, entered guilty pleas for the attack at a courthouse in Joliet today.
By the 2020s, there was a rift inside of the mafia, since the older generation was eliminated in the previous mafia wars. The Sicilian faction was in disarray. Who was going to be the benefactor of an underworld industry which took decades to build, in which Del Balso was a factor in carrying out daily operations in its latter years? In the heyday of Vito Rizzuto, in which Leonardo could not take credit for. But there was only one problem. It was still built upon the blood of the Rizzuto family. His brother, his grandfather, and his father. And so if there's anyone that should inherit this industry in which the demand had been carefully built, then it was gonna be him. It's understandable that a captain whose hands touched millions, Del Balso, did not want to play underling anymore. He had earned it. He had done his time. He was loyal. He deserved to be a leader.
That's it. No more playing nice. Capiche?
On March of 11th, 2023, Del Balso shows up at Lou La Vie, which in English is called Rent Life, where he picks up a key to a newly rented Porsche. Mysteriously, the contract does not have his signature on it, rather has the signature of the owner of this shop. Following this, the very next day, Del Balso gets on board a plane to Cuba, and the day after that, Brown Rock goes to the same shop where he goes to pick up the red Porsche Macan, which would be the very same vehicle that Del Balso went to pick up the keys for. Then the next day, which is March 14th, Brown Rock and his accomplice, Steve Emmanuel Barthélemy, returned to the shop, and this time to pick up another Porsche Macan, which is black. Now, the day of the hit, March 15th, 2023, a Jeep Cherokee parks on Rue Saguenay near the black Porsche Macan. They are both on the same street. Then Brown Rock gets on board the black Porsche Macan, which is then being followed by the Jeep Cherokee. At 3:45, the Porsche Macan parks itself in the parking lot of a commerce called Rome Cafe in Laval. Approximately 34 minutes pass before the Mercedes-Benz of Leonardo Rizzuto leaves the parking lot, after which it is being followed by the black Porsche Macan. The police managed to capture the flow, which shows Rochebrun successfully pursuing even at high speeds on the highway 440. It is no more than 8 minutes after having left the parking lot of Rome Cafe that the windows on the passenger side drop, as the Porsche Macan is positioned side by side, and witnesses see an arm flexing out of it, leveled with the Mercedes of Leonardo.
Men were sentenced to prison and are banned from possessing weapons for life.
For life, you say? But really, what's gonna stop him? A couple of laws? Canadian ones? In my opinion, only age can mellow a fellow like that. With certain exceptions, of course.
What did you say?
Yeah, I know, but even the death dealer Raymond stopped the killings later in life. Now this time, Brown Rock got sentenced to 10. One must wonder how many of those he's actually going to end up serving. And it's not like I care personally, but it's about Canada, and nothing seems to work right anymore. It's becoming more and more lawless, dangerous. You should almost put a banner telling everyone across the world, come to Canada, run your own drug trafficking operation.
But a recent bust in BC suggests they're also producing enough here to send abroad. At this super lab, police say the chemicals seized would have amounted to nearly 100 million doses of fentanyl.
The fact that they are here, I will say thriving, it is dangerous for sure. It has been significantly increasing, of course, because of the advantages that Canada offers.
Run your own drug trafficking operation and kill whoever you like. The gamble's worth it. You gotta read this between the lines to understand why things have been exploding here up in Canada. Anyways, we can see that Marco Pizzi has been a target in a war, and that war has been going on for a pretty long time. But now that Del Balso's gone and his friends are locked up, it's been rather quiet until recently.
Il faut bien en venir aux sources dans ce dossier-là. C'est un personnage très lié à la mafia montréalaise. Il a été accusé dans l'opération Clem.
To end this video in a not surprising twist, it's just a cycle. These things repeat themselves. At 6:30 in the morning last week, the tactical squad of the Montreal police have intervened inside of Gestion Automobile Plus, the dealership. It seems the cops wanted to go in a show of force. They made a big scene. As for now, the motives for this arrest are still unclear. Stay tuned as we wait for more info.